All right, it's official. The 2024 Buffalo Bills roster purge has begun. We are sitting here Wednesday, March 6th, 2024, and the Buffalo Bills are making plenty of moves, plenty of tough decisions, plenty of financial business decisions that GMs around the league hate to make, but they're the reality of the business that is the National Football League, that is sports overall. As farther and farther these players go, Father Time remains undefeated and undisputed in the world of sports. So, breaking news here, of course, Jordan Poyer was the first domino to fall as the first longtime Bill to be released. Center Mitch Morse was the next domino to fall as the next longtime Bill to be released. And then third and final, the next captain, longtime Bill, 3 captains cut in one day. Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse, as well as Tre'Davious White, gone. Nyheim Hines, cut last week. Siran Neal, cut as well today, a special teams ace for the Buffalo Bills and a backup safety. As well, you take a look at what this means for the salary cap, because these decisions mattered within 3 aspects of the organization: age, injury, and effectiveness or ineffectiveness. Deontay Hardy as well also cut today. So the Bills made massive moves today, the likes of which we've never seen in one day. And the fact that, of course, you also have plenty of moves more to make. This is not the end of these moves for the Buffalo Bills. They still have some more room to go. But per Adam Schefter, cutting Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse, Siran Neal, Deontay Hardy, and Nyheim Hines will create approximately $25.96 million in salary cap space. Buffalo entered the day $40 million over the cap. The release of Tre'Davious White will open up another $10.2, putting Buffalo at $35.96 million more in salary cap space, which would put them at a little over $5 million over the cap. But the $10.2 million that will be given back to the Bills in terms of creating cap space will only be available after June 1st. So Buffalo will designate Tre'Davious White as a post-June 1st roster cut, which will save them $10.2 million in salary cap space with $6.2 in dead money. His contract will remain on the books until then, but he's free to sign with a new team as early as next week. So massive, earth-shattering news is here. It is the end of an era. It is. There's no two ways about it. Cornerstone players on your defense are gone. Cornerstone, long-time captains, 3 captains cut in a day. One of them a special teams player as well. One of them a receiver that they signed last season. Punt returner as well, and Nyheim Hines. Now, I want to address the word rebuild. I don't believe that this is a full-on rebuild, because you still have the nucleus pieces, the Josh Allens, the Stephon Diggs, the James Cooks, Ed Oliver. I think I'd like to acknowledge, though, what it does mean for the future of the team in terms of their offensive line, specifically left guard and center. So earlier in the week, the Bills had traded Ryan Bates to the Chicago Bears, and they were able to pick up an extra 5th-round draft choice from Chicago by trading Bates away. Now, quite frankly, I was quite shocked by that. Ryan Bates, a great depth piece lineman. I thought if Mitch Morse was going to be cut, that Ryan Bates would take his job as the next man up as a center in Buffalo. But then they traded Bates away, and then they cut Mitch Morse. So what this means for their offensive line is this. Those options, as of now, are rumored to be replaced in-house with guys that they already have. Moving Connor McGovern from left guard to center and putting David Andrews as the new left guard alongside Deion Dawkins on the offensive line. Another name to look out for, another name to remember, would be Alec Anderson, who has played tackle and guard, undrafted free agent, signed by the Bills in 2022. So there are a lot of layers to this situation, and as I sit here in studio with my Tim Hortons coffee, / cappuccino actually, French vanilla, you gotta love it. I knew that this day would come, and it had to come. These moves had to be made. And this is the part of where the rubber meets the road as an NFL franchise. The restructuring, and all these moves that have been made to avoid making these moves, it was inevitable that these myriad of moves would come in one day's time. But they're moves that needed to be made. The Bills have to get younger. They have to get cheaper and younger. And doing so is going to make them viable sooner, long-term as well. Say they keep these guys, they'd be far under the cap. There'd be no moves to be made for the rest of the offseason. So, unfortunately, you can't move Von Miller. And he's the worst contract in the National Football League as it stands right now. He can't be moved. Had you not signed Von Miller, maybe Mitch Morse finishes his career in Buffalo. Had you not signed Von Miller, maybe Jordan Poyer finishes his career in Buffalo. Had you not signed Von Miller, maybe Tremaine Edmonds last season also gets extended on a new deal. But the reality is they signed Von Miller. When you make one move that's as big as that one, you got to take into consideration who it doesn't allow you to keep, and you have to take into consideration who else is available for the Buffalo Bills to not only add from other teams or the draft, but who is available to re-sign, who is up to be extended by the Buffalo Bills. And that's, to me, the part that bothers me the most, is seeing the Buffalo Bills potentially lose their own players to other teams that are in their prime. Guys like Greg Rousseau, guys like AJ Epinesa. Now, Epinesa's contract is up this year. Rousseau's up the year after that. I know Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid's contracts end at the same time in the next few years. But there's a lot of moves that had to be made. I think the biggest win today, if there ever was one for the Buffalo Bills, making this many changes to their roster, is the fact that Rasul Douglas was willing to restructure his contract. The guy that the Bills look at as their new number one corner, Rasul Douglas, a player that they were able to trade a third-round pick for to Green Bay and keep him, restructure him. He's under contract next year. He's under contract next year at a lower price as they work to get him extended next season. So that's great news. It's fantastic news. And I know that the reaction on Twitter right now is not that great. The Twitter machine, X, whatever you want to call it. I know that Bills fans are frustrated. And they're frustrated because there's a lot of sticker shock to the idea of not seeing Jordan Poyer in a Bills uniform, not seeing Trey White in a Bills uniform, not seeing Micah Hyde in a Bills uniform, who I do believe is going to retire. And that's a lot to digest. It's a lot of change on one side of the football, especially. It's a lot of change for Josh Allen, too, to not get the snaps from the guy that he's played center with essentially since his second season. I thought there was 1 year in there with Eric Wood. Maybe not. I'd have to go back and look at that from my memory. I can't quite remember. But at the very least, for the majority of Josh Allen's career, he's played with Mitch Morse. That's not the case anymore. And I got a question coming in from somebody tuning in right now, which I greatly appreciate. Does this mean by cutting Morris, is there any chance that they'd be able to just cut and sign him back? I don't know why they would do that. That doesn't make much sense to me as to why they would cut somebody and then try to sign him back at a lower price when they could have just restructured him and worked it out that way. But I think there were reasons that these were the players that were cut today. These specific players, you can go down the laundry list of reasons as to why they were cut that deals with salary cap, as I mentioned. But there were other reasons individually why these specific players were released from the Buffalo Bills today. Starting off with Jordan Poyer, 33 years old. And that's it. That's the reality of it. 7-8 years with this team. He wouldn't be playing another year with Micah Hyde. He wants to play on a team that's headed upward, not a team that's headed linear or potentially downward. And they gave him that opportunity to seek the market again, maybe sign on one last final season with another team, or maybe Jordan Poyer did intend to retire and let the Bills know of that, and he was still under contract, but maybe he wasn't sure, so it was like, okay, if you're not sure on your retirement, maybe we'll just cut you. And I'm just speculating here. I'm not saying that that's fact. And in the case of Deontay Hardy, 1-year guy, you can cut him, get cap relief, no bonus money attachment, only savings would be attached to that in terms of the cap. Mitch Morse, $8 million in savings, $3 million dead. I gave you the Trey White kind of outline of what his contract looks like, but I didn't give you the Trey White reason as to why he was cut. And it's devastating to say it, but 2 devastating leg injuries, knee injuries, ankle injuries, whatever you want to call it, 2 devastating leg injuries in 3 years. And this is the one that actually does hurt, because I know for a fact how hard Trey White battled his way back to getting to where he got to start the season this year, only for a season to end 5 weeks into it at home in front of all of our fans. It was sad. But this game is cruel. This business is cruel. And the sport moves on. Every sport moves on. From football to fighting, great fighting champions. They're on top, and before you know it, they're at the bottom. They either have to climb their way back up or they fade off into the sunset. Right off into the sunset, and that's that. And I do understand that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, they do not want to rebuild. They don't look at this as a rebuild. They look at this as a retool, a shakeup, a cap crunch. They look at it as, we got to take these steps back in order to take the steps forward that we need to take. And, obviously, I think credit needs to be thrown at Sean McDermott's direction in this category. Sean McDermott's ability to seek and find defensive players by any means necessary. And yes, somebody could counter that and they could say, well, what about Kyer Elam? That's a situation where I think the player doesn't fit the scheme as well as they had thought. That's a situation where you are working with a disciplinarian type coach in Sean McDermott who doesn't necessarily give a first-round pick a job just because he was a first-round pick. They have to earn it. And that is kind of Sean McDermott's MO as a coach. But I will tell you that he did find Jordan Poyer. He did find Micah Hyde. He inserted those guys into the lineup, and for 7-8 years, they were the tandem in the National Football League at safety. The tandem of this era. So I think they're 2 players that didn't get nearly the credit that they deserved. I think they're 2 players that should be praised for their time here in Buffalo, what they provided, what they changed within the organization. And I would hope that they're honored in due time as legends of the Buffalo Bills, put on the wall, local legends. Hopefully we see them at signings and events that I go to and things like that. I'd love to see those guys there. They belong as a forever piece of what makes this community so great as a support system to the Buffalo Bills and vice versa. It's a mutual love relationship between the Bills Mafia and the Bills, as it always has been. The Bills don't want to take too many steps back. They want to only take steps forward. And today was a very aggressive day Don't get me wrong. It was an aggressive day. The most aggressive day, I think, in the history of the team as of recently. And I would like to think, too, that we're at a point where I could say it's one of the wildest days. Rachel_Bush, the wife of Jordan Poyer, she says, so much to say about our time spent in Buffalo. Can't find the words just yet. Thank you all. So many memories made over the years. Grateful for it and grateful for you all. Yeah. Jordan Poyer, Bills Wall of Famer. Micah Hyde, Bills Wall of Famer. And what a huge day in Buffalo sports history. This was not the only domino to fall today in terms of Buffalo sports. The Buffalo Sabres, they also moved on from a longtime player. 7-year career here in Buffalo from 18 years old to 25 years old. Centerman, forward, winger, Casey Middlestat traded from the Buffalo Sabres to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange. And I had the name in front of me. My apologies. I'm just getting so many tweets here, as this is just a crazy freaking day. Bowen Byram. Almost said Burner Byram. Bowen Byram. It's a tongue twister. But Bowen Byram, this is a player 22 years old, a defenseman, left-handed, guy that can be a top-flight defenseman for the Sabres, first line or second. More likely than not the first, from what I'm reading. So, won a cup in Colorado, played the most 5-on-5 minutes as a defenseman in that Stanley Cup final. And a huge deal for the Sabres to pull the trigger on that. In terms of Casey Middlestat, I really wish him the best. I really do. I wish him all the luck in the world, because he really did start to turn it on, and he started to become a player that I really wanted to see. And I did not want this move to happen with the Sabres trading Casey Middlestat. I thought there was room for him to get extended. It's not like they didn't have the cap space, and not exactly paying hardly anybody other than Skinner, and Okposo is going to be off the books very soon, whether it's in the trade deadline or at the end of this year. But at the very least, a huge day for Buffalo sports, and a day that I think March 6th, 2024 will be remembered as the end of an era for the Buffalo Bills especially. And just when the Sabres are like, okay, well, we're going to control the headlines today, the Buffalo Bills come in and they say, hold my beer. Brandon Beane says, Kevin Adams, hold my beer. I got some work to do. I got some things I got to get done. And wow, what a move. What a move. It is a move that I think will be talked about throughout this offseason. How do they replace these guys? That's the question. That's the question. And it's a real shame that these players that were such a long part of this team, the Trey Whites, the Micah Hydes, the Jordan Poyers, it's a real shame that they couldn't get it done. Quite frankly, it's a real shame that we just couldn't get over that hump that is the AFC powerhouse, the NFL powerhouse, the dynasty that is the Kansas City Chiefs, evidently. We didn't know it then. We didn't know it in the 13 seconds game that the team that won that game was going to go one way, and the team that won that game, lost that game rather, was going to go the other. And I say that, and I say that because that is kind of what happened. But at the same time, these Bills teams have been very good these last few years. They've just fallen just short of what their goals were. And the teams standing in the way, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Chiefs, in the last 4 years. And Those players played in a lot of really big games. They won the AFC East 4 years in a row. They just couldn't get over the hump. That was those two teams in those years. Kansas City, 3 out of the last 4. 20, 21, then the Bengals in 22, and the Chiefs in 23, for those seasons, respectively. What is the draft plan? Is it going to be safety? Is it going to be wide receiver? Is it going to be offensive line? I think it's going to be all the above after today. Just a matter of what order do they go in? How do they attack that? That's a huge question. And will they be free agency players if they're able to restructure Josh Allen's contract? Who else is going to get cut? I mean, is Brandon Beane just saying, for lack of a better term, fuck it. I'm going to cut whoever we need to cut to get at that number? It's the way it seems. That's the way it seems. You know, and he mentioned at the scouting combine that he was going to have to make tough decisions. He did. And when he said that, I thought, okay, something's coming. I didn't think it all happened in one day, but it did. Usually when moves like this happen, more moves come. That's just kind of the way the NFL works. When one team makes, it's how sports works, really. When one team makes one move, they make another move. Earlier this morning, the Colorado Avalanche made a trade, and then they made another trade with Buffalo. You know, and then that both trades weren't with Buffalo. I correct myself there. One trade was with another team, and later in the day, Avalanche made another trade, and that was with the Sabres. So when teams are working, when teams are moving and shaking, they're going to get stuff done. And Brandon Beane got a lot done today. I think there's a lot of sticker shock, as I said, because of these names and what they meant to the team and what they provided to the team for the last 7 years, especially in the case of Jordan Poyer, the years that Mitch Morse was here. Trey White, though, hadn't provided a lot to the team in 2 out of the last 3 years. He'd suffered devastating leg injuries. So it was time for these players. And I don't think you can remember a day that rivaled this one outside of Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed being cut in the same day. And that happened in the early 2000s. Both guys, Bruce Smith, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, they were all cut in the same day. 2 would go on to play for the then Washington Redskins, and Thurman Thomas would sign with Miami. He'd suffer a knee injury again, and then he was out, and that was it. And Bruce Smith hit the 200 sack mark in Washington. Andre Reed finished his career as a Washington Redskin, and then they both retired as Buffalo Bills. All 3 of them actually retired, of course, signed one-day deals and did the whole bit, came back here and all that. I remember that actually pretty well for how little I was back then. So it's a sad day, a lot of moving, a lot of shaking. I had to hop on here and provide the Bills Mafia my take on all of this, as I always will within this podcast as long as I'm living and breathing. So I greatly appreciate you guys tuning into the show tonight. The Buffalo Bills roster purge. I like that. Just watched the purge the other day. Obviously tongue-in-cheek there, but I wish nothing but the best to the rest of the players that I had mentioned as released. Honestly, I want to thank them for what they provided to the Buffalo Bills, the success that they were able to accomplish. I wish them nothing but the best, whether they play with another team or not, just in life, in their careers, whatever it may be. I wish them nothing but the best. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, genuinely, thank you. So that is it. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. The Buffalo Bills roster purge has begun. More to come. Stay tuned. As the Bills make moves, I'll give you my take.